midnight screams.
I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe because it's 3 a.m. and I haven't really slept in about a decade. Maybe because I'm tired of being the only person I know who sees the world for what it really is. Or maybe I'm just lonely. Whatever the reason, I have to tell someone. I'll probably delete this in the morning. There are 2 moons in the sky. No, I'm not crazy. I mean, maybe I am now, but I wasn't then. Before I saw it, before I was made to see it. I live in New Mexico now, as far from a major body of water as you can get in this country. I bought a small house on a dusty plot of land where the rain evaporates before it even has a chance to make a proper puddle. I have to. It's the only way to stay safe. It's one of the rules I have to live by. Rule number 1, never go within 10 miles of the coast. Rule number 2, never trust the tide. I used to love the ocean. I grew up on the East Coast, spending summers getting sunburned and swallowing salt water. The idea of living in a place where the air is so dry it cracks your lips would have been my own personal version of hell. Funny how things change. Now, the smell of rain is enough to make my heart try to beat its way out of my chest. I guess I should start at the beginning, back when I had a different name and a different life. June 4th, 2012, I worked for a private research consortium. That's the official bullshit line anyway. We were a government-funded, black-budget operation with a fancy, forgettable name. Our real purpose was complicated. I worked at a place they called Area 38, a sprawling campus of white, windowless buildings plopped down in the middle of nowhere. My job was in the astronomy department, but it wasn't nearly as cool as it sounds. I wasn't a scientist. I was a data monkey. My official title was Junior Data Archivist. I spent 10 hours a day in a cooled, humming server room, watching streams of telemetry data scroll down a bank of monitors. Information from orbital telescopes, radio arrays, deep space probes. My job was to make sure the data was clean, properly tagged, and routed to the right research divisions. It was mind-numbingly boring. Most of the time, I was just watching for error codes. The only interesting part of my job was Dr. Eris Thorne. Eris was a lead astrophysicist, a genuine, certified genius, with eyes that always seemed to be looking at something a million miles away. She was one of those people who was so brilliant she'd kind of loop back around to being weird. She'd forget to eat for days, she wore mismatched socks, and she talked to her computer monitors like they were disobedient children. She was also the only senior staff member who ever treated me like a human being. She'd bring me coffee sometimes, the real stuff from her personal French press, not the sludge from the break room. She'd ask me about my weekend, and sometimes she'd get this excited glint in her eye and try to explain what she was working on. Most of it went right over my head. Gravitational lensing, redshift anomalies, pulsar timings. I'd just nod and try to look smart. One night, she came into the server room later than usual. It must have been close to midnight. I was the only one there, just me and the hum of the machines. "Leo," she said, her voice a little shaky. She was holding a star chart, but it was printed on old, yellowed paper, not the crisp printouts we usually used. It looked ancient. "I need you to pull something for me, off books." That was a red flag, but I liked Eris, and I was bored. "Sure. What are you looking for?" She spread the chart out on my console. It was a patch of sky in the constellation Draco. She pointed to a spot that was completely empty. I need the raw telemetry from the orbital scope, HST-7B, focused right here. She tapped the blank spot. Everything from the last 6 months. There's nothing there. Eris, I said, pulling up the public-facing star map on my screen. It's just black. I know, she whispered, and the look in her eyes sent a shiver down my spine. It was a mix of terror and elation. That's the point. The data has to be there. They're just filtering it out. Please, Leo. I think I'm onto something huge. Something in my gut screamed at me to say no, to log the request, to follow protocol. But I didn't. I spent the next 3 hours digging through archived data caches, using a few backdoors I'd built for myself out of sheer boredom, and I found it. A massive encrypted data block, flagged for deletion, all centered on that exact patch of empty sky. I bypassed the encryption. It was old, sloppy work, like someone had put it there in a hurry and rerouted the raw data stream to Eris's private terminal. I didn't hear from her for 3 days. June 7th, 2012. She found me in the cafeteria, looking like she had been awake for the entire 72 hours. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were bloodshot, but she was grinning, a wild, triumphant smile. She grabbed my arm and dragged me out of my chair. You have to see it, she said, pulling me through the hallways toward the main observatory dome. See what? Eris, you're gonna get me fired. It's worth it, she said, breathless. We got to the observation deck. It was a massive circular room, dark and cold. In the center was the main telescope, a monster of polished steel and glass aimed at the ceiling, where a circular section of the dome was open to the night sky. They call it an info hazard, she said, her voice echoing in the huge space. An idea that's dangerous. But it's not just an idea, Leo. It's real. They've been hiding it for God knows how long. She guided me to the eyepiece. Don't look yet, she commanded. Just listen. You know how you can't see the air? It's all around you. You're breathing it, moving through it, but your brain just edits it out because it's not important information. It's just a given. It's always there. Okay, I said, my heart starting to pound. There's something up there like that. Something huge. Something that's been there for maybe billions of years. Our brains have evolved to ignore it, to see the empty space where it is. Because to see it is to understand something your mind isn't meant to handle. The only way to see it is for someone to tell you it's there, to plant the seed, to make your brain look again, properly this time. I was starting to get a very, very bad feeling. Eris, what did you find? She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. There are 2 moons, Leo. I laughed, a nervous, hollow sound. That's crazy. Is it? She said, her eyes boring into mine. I'm telling you, right now, that there is a second moon. It's smaller than Luna, our moon, but it's much closer. It's an irregular shape, like a captured asteroid. It's in a retrograde orbit. It's there. It's real. Now, look. She stepped back. I hesitated for a long moment. Every instinct was telling me to run, but I couldn't. I had to know. I put my eye to the telescope. At first, I saw exactly what I expected to see. The deep, velvet black of space, the pinprick glitter of distant stars, The patch of sky she'd pointed out on the chart was just as empty as it was supposed to be. "I don't see anything," I said, relieved. "Keep looking," she urged, her voice tight. "Just accept it. Know it's there." So I did. I stared into the blackness, and I repeated her words in my head. "There are 2 moons. There are 2 moons." It felt stupid, like a cheap magic trick. And then it happened. It wasn't a sudden appearance. It was more like my brain was correcting a lifelong error, a flicker at the edge of my vision, a patch of black that was somehow blacker than the space around it. I blinked, and the image held. My focus sharpened. The empty space began to resolve itself, like an optical illusion snapping into place. The blackness took on texture, craters, jagged edges. A faint grayish light clung to one side of it, sunlight, reflecting off a surface that, a second ago, wasn't there. I gasped and pulled away from the eyepiece, my head spinning. The world felt tilted, off balance. "You see it, don't you?" Aris said, her smile gone, replaced by a look of profound, soul-shaking terror. I looked back. The thing was massive, an ugly potato-shaped rock hanging in the void. It wasn't beautiful and serene like our moon. It was a cosmic tumor, a jagged, silent threat that had been hiding in plain sight my entire life. I stumbled back, away from the telescope. "What is it?" "Montag caught it Luna 2, she said, her voice distant. "He was the first, the amateur who found it back in, well, a long time ago. My God, Leo, do you know what this means?" I didn't, but I was about to find out. Looking at the sky with my naked eye was even worse. Now that I knew it was there, I couldn't not see it. It was faint, a smudge against the darkness, but it was unmistakably there. The sky felt crowded, wrong, violated. The first few days after that were weird, but manageable. The only immediate side effect was the light. Nights weren't as dark anymore. The combined light of our familiar moon and this new one, this intruder, cast a pale, silvery glow over everything. I could see details in the landscape at midnight that should have been impossible. It was unsettling, but I told myself it was kind of a neat party trick. Yeah, big mistake. July 19th, 2012, around 2 in the afternoon. My sister was getting married. I'd taken a week off work to fly back home to Maine for the wedding. My parents lived in a small coastal town, the kind of picturesque place you see on postcards. I hadn't been back in a couple of years. I was excited to see everyone, to smell the salt air, to feel normal for a little while. I rented a car at the airport in Portland and started the drive up the coast. It was a beautiful summer day, blue sky, puffy white clouds. I had the windows down, listening to the radio. Everything felt right. I was about 15 miles out from my town when I crested a big hill that gives you the first panoramic view of the bay, and my blood ran cold. The water was wrong. It wasn't a little wrong. It was catastrophically, apocalyptically wrong. The tide was in, but it was higher than I had ever seen it. Higher than was physically possible. The beaches were gone. The marina was completely submerged, the tops of boat masts poking out of the water like grave markers. The entire historic downtown area, the first 2 blocks up from the harbor, was underwater. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a stop on the shoulder. My hands were shaking. I thought it must have been a tsunami, a hurricane. but the sky was clear. The radio was playing top 40 hits, not emergency broadcasts. I fumbled for my phone and called 911. 911. What's your emergency? My town. It's flooded. Rockport. It's underwater. I yelled, my voice cracking. There was a pause on the other end. Sir, we haven't had any reports of flooding in Rockport. Where are you right now? I'm on the hill on Route 1. I'm looking right at it. The whole downtown is gone. Sir, I'm showing no alerts for that area. Are you sure you're all right? While she was talking, a car passed me. An old station wagon. It drove right down the hill and kept going, heading straight for the part of the road that I was seeing as being submerged under at least 20 feet of churning gray water. I screamed, waiting for the splash, for the car to sink, but it just kept driving. It moved into the flooded area, and then something strange happened. Its speed seemed to decrease, its movement becoming slow and labored, as if it were pushing through something thick and heavy. But it didn't sink. It just drove on, water that wasn't there, spraying from its tires that weren't wet. I hung up on the 911 operator. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was I hallucinating? Was this some kind of psychotic break? Then I remembered Arise's words. To see it is to understand something your mind isn't meant to handle. This was the effect. The real effect. Luna 2. It had its own gravitational pull. The file Aris had found must have mentioned it. The combined gravity of two moons was creating phantom tides. Tides that only people who could see the second moon could perceive. I drove slowly down the hill, my heart in my throat. I stopped the car right at the edge of where I saw the water begin. To me, it was a clear line. On one side, dry asphalt. On the other, a restless ocean. I got out of the car. The air smelled of salt and brine. I could hear the waves crashing. A family walked past me, laughing and talking. A father, a mother, a little girl. They walked right past the line, and I watched in absolute horror as they waded into the invisible sea. Their movements changed instantly. Their steps became heavy, their legs pushing against an unseen resistance. The little girl, who had been skipping, was now lifting her knees high, like she was wading through thick mud. The water level, to my eyes, was up to the parents' waists. The little girl was submerged up to her neck. She wasn't laughing anymore. Her face was scrunched in concentration as she struggled to walk. They didn't seem to notice. They just kept walking down the perfectly dry sidewalk, their bodies behaving as if they were fighting a powerful current. I felt like I was going to throw up. I spent the rest of the day in my car on that hill, watching my hometown. I saw my neighbors, my old friends, people I'd known my whole life, going about their days submerged in a phantom ocean. I saw teenagers on bikes, their legs pumping in slow motion as they pushed through the invisible water. I saw an old man walking his dog, the little terrier paddling furiously with its front paws, its head just above the imaginary surface. The world had become a waking nightmare. I called my parents. My mom answered, cheerful and happy to hear from me. I asked her if anything strange was going on. No, sweetie, just a beautiful day. Your dad's out on the boat, actually, said the waters calm as glass. My dad, on his boat. I looked out at the bay, at the real water, and then at the phantom tide line that was now halfway up the hills surrounding the town. My dad was out there, in a boat, floating on an ocean that was sitting on top of another, larger, more terrifying ocean that only I could see. The cognitive dissonance was so strong I thought my skull would crack open. I couldn't go into town. I couldn't face my family. How could I hug my mother when I saw her submerged to the chest in suffocating brine? I made up an excuse car trouble and told them I'd be there in the morning. I spent the night in my car, watching the twin moons move across the sky, their pale light illuminating a drowned world that didn't know it was dead. The next morning, I drove back to Area 38. I never made it to the wedding. August 1st, 2012. When I got back to work, I was immediately taken into custody by internal security. They knew. Of course they knew. Aris was gone. Her office was cleaned out. Her name scrubbed from the internal directory. It was like she'd never existed. They sat me down in a sterile white room. A man in a suit, with a face that had all the warmth of a filing cabinet, laid a single, thick file on the table in front of me. The cover was stamped in red, SCP 1812. "You know what this is," he said. It wasn't a question. I opened it. It was all there. The data on the asteroid, its mass, its orbit, and the section on its cognito-hazardous properties. It explained everything. The phantom tides, the way it affects perception. Then I got to the case file of Alexander Montag, the amateur astronomer, the one Aris had mentioned. He'd discovered Luna 2, or SCP-1812, on his own. He slowly went insane, convinced that New York City was flooded. He locked himself on the roof of his university, charting the phantom tides, refusing to come down. He built a makeshift boat out of an old air conditioning unit. One day, he tried to launch it into what he called the Sea of New York. He fell 5 stories. The report said the fall didn't kill him. He was alive when the paramedics reached him. He died on the pavement a few minutes later. The cause of death was asphyxiation, severe hypoxia. He drowned on dry land. I looked up from the file, my mouth dry. "If your head goes under," the man in the suit nodded slowly, "your body believes it's drowning. Your autonomic nervous system initiates the laryngospasm reflex. Your throat closes up. You can't breathe. You suffocate. To all outside observers, you've just had a fatal, unexplained seizure, but we know what it is." It finally hit me. The little girl in my hometown. The water was up to her neck. If she had tripped, if she had fallen, I spent the next 2 weeks in a medical ward, undergoing debriefing. They tried the cures on me. They brought in a psychologist who tried to convince me, using hypnotic suggestion and carefully worded logic, that the water wasn't real, that it was safe to enter the coastal areas. It almost worked. For a day, the phantom ocean receded in my mind. I felt normal. Then I went to get a glass of water from the drinking fountain. I turned the knob, the water arched out, and I felt a wave of pure, absolute panic. I couldn't tell the difference. Was this real water, or was it the phantom liquid that would kill me? Was I about to drink, or was I about to drown? My body wouldn't let me get near it. I became violently dehydrated over the next 12 hours before they gave up and hooked me to an IV. Then they tried the other way. They tried to convince me that the extra moonlight from SCP-1812 was also a hallucination. That one was even worse. As soon as I started to believe them, the world went dark. Not just the moonlight, all light. The sun, the fluorescent bulbs in the ceiling, everything vanished. I was plunged into a state of total, sensory-deprived blindness. I started screaming and didn't stop until they reversed the process. There is no cure. Once you know, you can never unknow. They gave me a choice. I could be retired, a dose of Class A amnestics that would wipe my memory clean, followed by a reassignment to some dead-end job in their corporate structure. Or I could take a relocation package, a new identity, a generous stipend, and a list of approved places to live, all of them in the most arid, landlocked regions of the country. I took the deal. So here I am, 10 years later. I'm Leo again, but a different Leo. I check the global tide charts every single morning. It's a morbid hobby. I watch the tides rise and fall in London, in Tokyo, in Sydney. In my mind's eye, I see the invisible water levels creeping up the sides of buildings, flooding subways, turning those beautiful coastal cities into silent, watery tombs that only I and a few hundred other poor bastards can see. I've never told anyone. Who would believe me? I've tried to have relationships, but they always fall apart. How can you explain why you have a panic attack if your date suggests a weekend trip to the beach? How can you explain why you stare at the sky every night with a look of absolute hatred? I see it every night, you know. Luna too, my jailer. It hangs up there, a jagged, ugly secret, and it mocks me. It reminds me that the world I knew is gone forever, replaced by this terrifying new version where any coastline is a death sentence. I'm writing this because I have to, because the silence is its own kind of drowning. I know it's a risk. This is an info hazard. By telling you this, I'm planting the seed. I'm handing you the key to a door you can never close again. I'm a monster for doing it. I know that. But I'm so damn tired of being alone. So, if you're brave, or stupid, or just don't believe me, do me a favor. Tonight, go outside. Look up at the sky. Find the biggest, darkest, most empty patch of black you can find. Stare at it, and just know, deep down, that you're being lied to. Know that there's something there. Maybe you'll see it, and if you do, welcome to my world. Just, for God's sake, stay away from the water. I think the worst part is the uncertainty. It's been a decade. I've built a life here in the desert. It's quiet, it's safe, it's dry. But lately, I don't know. Maybe it's just my mind playing tricks on me after all this time. But some mornings, when I step outside, the ground looks darker than it should, almost damp. And when the wind blows just right, I swear I can smell salt. It's been a week since the incident. The official report calls it Incident 8024 Alpha. Catchy, right? Very sterile. Very neat. It doesn't mention the screaming, or the smell of burning reality, or the sight of a god bleeding to death on the floor of our worksite. I haven't slept more than an hour at a time since it happened. Every time I close my eyes, I hear it. That awful, wet banging from the other side. So, I'm writing this. I don't know why. Maybe typing it all out will make it feel real in a way that helps, instead of the way that makes you want to claw your own eyes out. Maybe I just need to tell someone who isn't bound by a dozen NDAs and the threat of a memory wipe. My name is Marco. At least, that's my name this year. I'm a containment specialist for let's call it a global security organization. My post is Containment Area 8024. On paper, it sounds pretty badass. A top-secret facility inside Mount Etna in Sicily. People imagine James Bond shit. Layers and lasers. The reality is, I guard a hole. It's not just any hole, though. It's a tear in the world. A doorway to somewhere else. Somewhere hot and loud and very, very angry. The job has its quirks. For starters, you can't just walk up to the entrance of our facility. It's at the base of the volcano, but you can't see it. You can be standing 3 feet away and all you'll see is a rock wall. To get in, you have to stand there and think about it. You have to genuinely contemplate the philosophical possibility that a door could and should exist right there. It sounds like bullshit, I know, but it's the only way. The first time I did it, I felt like a moron. Then the rocks shimmered like a heat haze, and the doorway just faded into view. Once you're in, you're in. You can see it forever. One of the many things about this job that messes with your head. Inside, it's not a bunker. It's a cave. A huge, cavernous space that looks like something out of myth. There are these massive Greek-style columns holding up the ceiling. In one corner, there's a giant rusted anvil and a bunch of old tools that look like they belong in a museum. And in the center of the cavern, surrounded by a lake of actual, bubbling lava, is the anomaly. SCP 8024, the gate. It doesn't look like much. Just a shimmering vertical distortion in the air over the lava, like the air itself is boiling. But all the heat, all the noise, all the wrongness of this place comes from that spot. We spend our days watching it. We have heat sensors, radiation detectors, and these things called count counters, which a tech guy once explained to me are basically reality detectors. Our job is to watch the numbers and pray they don't change. Most of the time, it's boring as hell. We do our shifts, we drink shitty coffee, we watch the pretty numbers on the screens. But sometimes, the gate gets angry. January 13th, 2011. My first day on site. I was fresh out of training, green as hell. About 3 hours into my first shift, the alarms went off. A low, gut-churning klaxon that means things have gone sideways. The Hume count was spiking. The whole cavern was vibrating, and a deep, guttural roar echoed out of the gate. A sound so powerful, I could feel it in my bones. We all suited up. Special gear, heat-proof suits lined with some miracle material called starlight. We grabbed our weapons, not that they do any good, and took up positions. I was terrified, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold my rifle. The senior agent next to me, a guy named Alvarez, just looked bored. He chewed on a toothpick. What's happening? I yelled over the roar. The tenant's making a racket, he shouted back. Landlord'll be here in a minute to shut him up. Before I could ask what the hell he meant, it happened. A flash of light, and a man was standing there, on the edge of the lava pool, not 10 feet from the gate. He hadn't been there a second ago. He was huge, over 2 meters tall, with a wild mane of white hair and a thick beard. He looked like one of those old statues of a Greek god, except he was breathing, and he was pissed. He didn't even glance at us. All his attention was on the roaring gate. He lifted his hands, and arcs of raw electricity crackled between his palms. Then he started throwing them, hurling these massive bolts of lightning, one after another, straight into the shimmering portal. With every bolt that hit, the roaring from inside would get louder, more furious. But after a few minutes, it started to subside. The vibrations lessened. The numbers on our monitors started ticking back towards normal. The old man threw one last bolt for good measure. Then he just vanished, gone in another flicker of light. The alarms shut off. The cavern was quiet again, save for the bubbling of the lava. I just stood there, my jaw on the floor. Alvarez clapped me on the shoulder. "See? Told ya. Now, let's go get some coffee. My shift's over." That was my introduction to SCP-80242. The jailer, the landlord, the old god who keeps the monster in our basement locked up. We don't know who he is for sure. Zeus? Hephaestus? The paperwork just calls him a reality-bending entity. But we know what he is. He's the only thing standing between whatever is in that gate and the rest of the world. And last week, we saw him almost lose. The incident. It started like the others. A rumble, a roar, the alarms. We suited up. We took our positions. The old man appeared, looking as grim and eternal as ever. He started throwing his lightning, but this time it was different. The roaring didn't stop. It got worse. The Hume levels kept climbing, higher than they'd ever been. The gate itself started to bulge, to fluctuate wildly. Then a stream of pure, white-hot fire shot out of it, blasting the cavern wall and melting solid rock like it was wax. The old man didn't even flinch from the heat. He just stopped throwing lightning and stared into the fire. And for the first time, I saw an expression on his face. It wasn't anger. It was something like weariness. Like he'd been fighting this war for longer than humanity has existed, and he was just so tired. Then he did something none of us had ever seen before. A weapon materialized in his hand, a huge curved sickle that shimmered with his own internal light. He gave us the little mortals in our fancy suits one brief passing glance, and then he leaped. He jumped straight into the gate, straight into hell. The moment he was gone, a silence fell over the room, a heavy, dreadful quiet that was 1,000 times more terrifying than the roaring. We all just looked at each other. The playbook had officially been thrown out the window. The jailer had gone inside. Our site director's voice crackled over the comms, shaking just a little. Omega 12 has been mobilized. Hacker is on standby. O5 is watching. Hold your positions. Then the sound started. A low rhythmic banging from the other side. It sounded wet and heavy. The sound of fists the size of cars hitting flesh. It was punctuated by roars, not just the one we knew, but dozens of others. Shrieks and howls and noises that have no place in our world. And through it all, the brilliant, blinding flash of the old man's lightning, lighting up the gate from the inside. We were listening to a god get into a brawl with a legion of monsters. Orders came down. They were going to try and help. They were going to fire a nuke through the gate. I remember laughing when I heard it. A hysterical, terrified laugh. A nuke. That was our best idea. trying to solve a mythological problem with a thermonuclear warhead. We prepped the delivery system, our hands moving on autopilot while the soundtrack to the end of the world echoed around us. The first nuke went in. There was a muffled whump, and the light from the gate flickered, but the banging and screaming didn't stop. It got louder, more frantic. A bolt of lightning shot out of the gate and hit the ceiling, showering us with debris and frying one of our reality anchors. The whole cavern felt like it was coming apart. Then, after what felt like an eternity, everything just stopped. The silence was absolute. No roaring, no banging, nothing. We stood there for over an hour, waiting, not knowing if the jailer had won, or if something else, something worse, was about to come crawling out. And then he emerged. He stumbled out of the gate and collapsed onto the ledge. He wasn't the proud, powerful being who had leaped in. His body was charred black. His left arm was gone, sheared off at the shoulder. A massive, gaping wound was torn across his chest, and from it dripped a thick, syrupy liquid the color of molten gold. His blood. He was still holding the sickle, dragging it across the floor as he tried to stand. He coughed, and more of the golden ichor spilled onto the rock. He didn't look at us. It was like we weren't even there. His eyes were fixed on the gate, on the prison he had just forced shut. Then, with a final shuddering breath, he dissolved into shimmering light and was gone. We stood in silence for a long time after that, just staring at the puddle of cooling, golden blood on the floor. The all clear was eventually given. The repair crews are here now, fixing the equipment, scrubbing the divine blood off the floor. The mountain is quiet, but we all know what we saw. We saw a god get torn apart. He won, this time. He managed to shove the monster back in its cage and lock the door, but he came out broken. So I sit here, in the quiet, in my bunk deep inside this mountain, and I listen. I listen to the low rumble of the lava, and I wonder what's happening on the other side of that gate. Is the monster healing? Is it getting stronger? Because the real fear, the one that keeps me awake at night, isn't that the jailer is a god. It's that even gods can die. And I don't know what we'll do when the next time the knocking starts. There's no one left to answer the door.